Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. And on this edition is a special, as we're joined by Mr. Akil Parker. He is a veteran mathematician. He is the founder and CEO of All This Math. He basically has dedicated his life to ensuring that our community gets a better understanding of mathematics. Welcome, Mr. Parker or Brother Akil, to Cultural Caravan.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, we've been talking about the importance of math. Let's start by what was it doing that encouraged you to get into mathematics?
Well, to be quite honest, what encouraged me to get into mathematics was I was seeking out math teaching positions back around 2005 because I was expecting my first child. And so there was really an economic reason because I wanted to be able to provide for my own food, clothing, and shelter, and also be able to provide for the food, clothing, and shelter of my oldest son, Nasim, who's now a 18-year-old college freshman at Morgan State, which is my alma mater, actually. I didn't pressure him to go there. He chose it on his own. But once I was leaving another position, I was originally a bank examiner with the FDIC, and it wasn't a good fit for me. So I needed another job. So I became a math teacher, and I've kind of never looked back. So it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. So that's kind of how I got into math initially. As time wore on, I developed more of an appreciation for mathematics from having to teach it, even though I was a strong math student for the vast majority of my K through 12 educational experience. Um, and then when I started also teaching on the college level, about like around 2018, as an adjunct professor initially at LaSalle University here in Philadelphia, and then the year after that at Cheney University outside of Philadelphia. I, gained an even stronger understanding of mathematics because I had to teach education courses. I had to teach math methods, so like how to teach math, and then I had to get a more deeper understanding of mathematics and kind of like why does that formula work, or why does that algorithm work, or why do we use this process, or why is this process the same as that process, which was very fruitful and very beneficial for me because at that point is when I also developed a love for mathematics because people always think, well, when did you, develop this love for mathematics? And I think, people think, I loved it my whole life or I loved it when I was a child. I didn't really love it when I was a child. It was a means to an end. It was just something that I was good at. And I liked the positive reinforcement I would receive from having good grades when I was a child.
Basically, as we think about math, we think about our history. As you know, African people were the first people on this planet. Everyone life derives from Africa. And you think about what is the connection between our ancestors and mathematics?
Well, I mean, and our ancestors were very civilized people. You can't have a civilization without mathematics because you have to be able to count different quantities of things. You have to be able to measure. You have to be able to, allocate resources, economically and fairly. All of these activities require mathematics. They require calculations. That question makes me think of one of the writings from W.E.B. Du Bois when he was describing a perfect educational system, right? A perfect educational system he found from his own research in Western Africa, in ancient Western Africa, where all of these like academic disciplines that we refer to in Western society, they were kind of inculcated into everyday life. Like every aspect of life was, there was chemistry in just our everyday activities. There was physics, there was mathematics, there was, literature, there was, language, all of these things. So there was no like marginalization of, of school subjects, from everyday life. So whereas, and I think the biggest indictment of that, or where we can see it, the greatest, the most glaring example of that is how we typically say things like, in the real world, whereas as if, what's happening outside of the school, the subjects that are taught in the school building are not the real world, right? As if chemistry is not the real world, physics is not the real world, mathematics, algebra 2, statistics, geometry is not
Mhm.
the real world, right? There's this contrast that takes place, where our ancestors, through having an African centered worldview, understood that no, all of these subjects are real, they're viable, they're useful,
Mhm.
and we do use them, on a regular and daily basis, and we teach our children, through example, through activity, how chemistry works and how physics works and how biology works, and how mathematics works, and then we have conversations about our history, and we pass on tradition, and we pass on stories, which is us recognizing our history.
You published a book entitled How to Use All This Math, Volume 1, last year. Basically, this book, from what I see, is really a way to actually address some of these questions of how math could be used. As you know, as a former educator, as an educator, period, over 35 years, I know that children always ask about, why should I learn this? Why should I learn it? What's the relevancy? So I noticed that in this book, you break down how young people should look at math, how adults should look at teaching or exposing their child to math, and break it down in such a way that's very user friendly. I'm assuming you were inspired by your experiences, correct?
Indeed, indeed, and also, my experiences with, raising, my own children. Like I already mentioned, my oldest son Nasim, who's 18. I also have a daughter, Asada, who you'll see on the All This Math YouTube channel, featured in a lot of the video content on there. She's 12, and my youngest son, even my youngest son Kwame, who's almost 5. So these are like lived experiences, that I'm sharing, with you. And because when people, here's the thing, like when people meet children of math teachers or math instructors, I think a lot of people, their first inclination is to believe, oh, you must be great at math. And my children are pretty good at math, but that's because they've been taught. They've been taught, by me, and I've always taken that very seriously. But what I'm doing, one of the things I'm doing with the book, similar to with the YouTube channel, is to offer the community the same type of teaching that I provided and continue to provide to my own children. I'm making it available to everybody. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to create a level playing field. I want our people to win, because I don't just want, for my children to be great at math, and so many black children in the black community are terrible at math and continue to be terrible at math. I want us all to be great at math together. Right. It doesn't make me happy to be able to sit back, and say, oh, well, my kids are great. My kids know this, my kids know that. My son was doing, and my son and my daughter were doing algebra since they were 6 years old because I taught them. But yet, we got 16, 17-year-old black boys and black girls that can't solve a simple two-step equation. That doesn't make me happy, right?
Mhm.
So this is why I want us to win together. I want all of us to have the knowledge and the understanding. I want our children to be prepared for math class. That's one of the reasons I wrote this book. Is children are going into math classes cold and unprepared, without the prerequisite skills necessary. And I think as a society, we typically have been conditioned to just outsource education. That's why we don't start a lot of independent schools a lot of times. And then furthermore, even with mathematics, we especially outsource it because of our own fears of mathematics and our own trepidation and discomfort with mathematics. So what this book is meant to do is to show parents, the layperson, that may not feel so confident in their mathematical ability, like, look, I can meet you where you are, and I'm going to show you how the things that you're doing with your kids on a regular basis anyway, we're going to
Mhm.
convert these into teachable moments.
Mhm.
And then also not just teachable moments, but practicable moments, right? So every time your child's in the car and y'all are running errands, your child can, put their tablet down or put their phone down, stop playing Roblox, stop playing Minecraft or whatever. And they can look at the license plate of the cars in front of them, and do practice calculations, practice arithmetic, practice adding the numbers on the license plate, practice multiplying them, dividing them, subtracting them, creating fractions with them. They can practice doing that, and on a regular basis. So that way, when they go to class, they go to school, if they're not homeschooled, then when the teacher introduces these topics, they're already familiar with them. Another thing, and this is political, this kind of reminds me of Malcolm saying, only a fool would, send his children to be educated by their enemy. So I think that because if we got to go to work and your children got to go somewhere and they got to go to school, right? That's fine, right? But I want us to, as a community, reorient ourselves to how we relate to public schools and charter schools and even private schools that we don't control, right? I want those institutions to become spaces of practice, right? Our children can learn the fundamental skills at home, um, through the provision of resources such as my book and my YouTube channel. They can learn the skills whether at home, on the block, on the corner, in the neighborhood, in the rec center, wherever. And then when we go to school, if you're in high school, middle school, elementary school, it doesn't matter. They can practice solving equations, but it's like they already know how to solve equations. So it's like, I don't really need this person, this white woman or this white man that may be racist. I don't need you to teach me anything. I just need you to just give me the textbook, give me some practice problems, and I'm gonna work them out because my elders already taught me how to do this, right? Or even the black teacher that's a bourgeois Negro and really has a lot of internalized anti-blackness and miseducation, so they don't really like themselves, so they don't like black kids either. So that person becomes irrelevant, right? Because that child does not require the level of vulnerability that is necessary to learn from someone, because learning is
Mhm.
a very vulnerable activity.
Let's talk about some of the benefits of learning mathematics. What are you saying some of the key benefits that children need as they learn mathematics?
Well, I'm sure that I'm biased when I say this, since I am a mathematician and I'm a math instructor, but I believe that math is the single greatest subject in terms of in terms of equipping people with problem solving skills, critical thinking ability, and analytical reasoning ability. Because when you're solving math problems, when you're simplifying expressions, when you're solving equations, you are constantly doing those things. Like, you're learning how to solve problems. You're learning how to decode word problems and translate them into equations, and then proceeding to solve those equations. And you're also learning how to check your work. You're learning how to recognize contradictions. A lot of us are taken advantage of constantly by corporations, by government officials, by government entities, by other individuals in our community, because we don't know how to recognize contradictions, right? We really live in a society. We some of us go through life and people are constantly telling us stuff that equates to, like, 68 is equal to -2, and we go for it. We just accept it because we don't understand. We lack the level of understanding to recognize contradictions, right? Even when we have contradictions in our own lives, we don't recognize our own contradictions. And we're human beings, we're going to have contradictions, but at a minimum, we should recognize them, right? So mathematics, that's one of the many things mathematics does. It helps us to recognize contradictions and understand contradictions. Um, it also helps us to understand social dynamics. When we talk about fractions and we talk about proportions, like I've encountered so many students throughout the years that hate fractions. Fractions are the bane of their existence. They don't want to see a fraction. They don't want to be around a fraction. And I'm convinced, this is my theory, that this serves a greater purpose. This fear of fractions, this phobia around fractions serves a greater purpose, because if you don't understand fractions, then you can't understand ratios. And a ratio is just a fraction, but a ratio is more geared toward discussing the relationship between values of numbers, right? If you don't understand ratios, you can't understand proportions. A proportion is where you have one ratio set equal to another. If you don't understand proportions, then you can't understand disproportionate relationships. So when rich people start talking about, well, look, I paid more money in taxes than these working class people, and then these middle class people, or these poor people, right? I paid $50 million in taxes. None of them paid $50 million in taxes, right? A lot of people will go for that. They'll hear that and they'll say, "Oh, well, he's got a point. He did. He paid 50 million in taxes." They're not thinking about the ratio of the amount of money in taxes that person actually paid compared to their total amount of income. That person might have $1 billion or $10 billion. So $50 million to a person that has $10 billion is a drop in the bucket. It's very different from a person that might make $70,000 in a year and is paying $15,000 in taxes. Those percentages are very different. The person that's paying $15,000 a year is paying a much higher percentage of their worth of their income than the person that is a multi-billionaire, even if they are paying $50 million.
Mhm.
But if we don't understand fractions and we're taught and conditioned and allowed to hate fractions and to fear fractions, we'll never understand ratios. We'll never understand ratios. We'll never understand proportions. We'll never understand proportions. We won't even be wired to think in terms of disproportionate relationships. Will fear that. So when that wealthy person stands up, starts talking about, it starts in and is basically continue and is speaking about how they benefit from monopoly capitalism, while most of us starve and are oppressed by monopoly capitalism, we won't even know that that is an issue. We won't even know. And so this is also one of my responses when people say things like, you know, I'm never going to use this. When am I ever going to use this?
Mhm.
And that a lot of people won't use it.
Mhm.
And as long as you don't use that type of thinking, those that control the society are very safe.
Just getting back to some of the benefits, what a person learns. You talk about, I guess, problem solving is one,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
Where you have to take something apart to really see where the issue is, to drill down
Mhm.
to the area that needs to be dealt with, which is one part of mathematics as well. You talk about critical thinking, right?
Mhm.
As another area where math can benefit a student in terms of how they're able to think critically, looking at two different things and be able to make distinctions between one and another. So that really is critical to to a life. Being able to work with other people, being able to solve problems, to think critically, and so forth. And what were some of the other things you saw that mathematics helps students to do?
Well, it definitely helps them to understand social dynamics. And, I think about, scholars that have influenced me greatly, such as Dr. John Henrik Clark and Kwame Ture and Dr. Amos Wilson, and a lot of the things that they talked about and their critique of, Western society and their analysis of Western society. A lot of the things that they talk about, I've been able to understand at a more deeper level. And it's more clear to me because of my understanding of mathematics, because a lot of what they're talking about, they're basically describing, things that can also be found in mathematical situations. So that's why it makes
Exactly.
perfect sense to me. Whereas a lot of people will say, they don't know what they're talking about, whatever. And I'm like, how do they not know what they're talking about? It makes perfect sense. like, but
Exactly.
but when I look at it, I look at it through a mathematical lens, so it all adds up, right?
Exactly. And that's why our children have to be taught these skills. I mean, to allow them, sometimes people just focus on the literacy, which is very important too. But if with the lack of understanding of the mathematical skills that will help them to deeper understand, it means the child is not fully educated.
You reminded me of something. I'm also on a mission. Since you mentioned literacy, I'm on a mission to destroy this false dichotomy that we have. A lot of us have in our community, and not just our community, but this idea of being a reading person versus a math person. Right?
Mhm.
I tell students all the time, you can't be a math person, a quote unquote math person, whatever that means. Math person is just a person that's a person. You're a human being, and you can do some math. That makes you a math person. And if you could do 2 plus 2 and know that it equals 4, then you can do math. So that makes you a math person. That's first of all. But if you cannot read, then you can't do math. So if
Mhm.
you're a so-called reading person and you think, oh, well, I can read books and I can read stories and I can analyze, information, that's a requirement in order to be able to understand word problems. And word problems are the everyday applications of the formulas and of the algorithms and everything, right? So we need you to be able to, you have to read before you do the math. And I've often encountered a lot of students that if you give them an equation, 3x plus 5 equals 10, solve for x. They can do it. They know the algorithm, they know the procedure. But if I give you a word problem where that word problem has to be translated into 3x plus 5 equals 10, they may not be able to do the translation. They can't decode it, right? So that's a reading comprehension issue. So there are a lot of times there are reading comprehension challenges that are masquerading as math challenges, because when we deal with word problems in a math class, that's where it gets exposed. But the teacher may
Mhm.
not understand that, wait, this is not a math, quote unquote, math issue. This is more of a reading comprehension issue and an issue with translation, right? So I definitely want to point that out, that I want us to get away from this dichotomy of either one or the either or. It's both and.
Absolutely.
It's
Excellent
both
point.
and also you can use mathematics and a mathematics approach to better understand grammar and literature. Some people can read sentences and view them as equations. Um, It may be a way to better make better meaning of a sentence. Okay, identify the different parts of the sentence: the predicate, the subject, the adverbs, the adjectives, the prepositions, the definite articles, the indefinite articles, all that type of stuff. You do the
Mhm.
same. We do the same thing with mathematical equations. We
Mhm.
identify the different parts, and then we
Absolutely.
get to work.
And one thing that I think one of the things about is being a good teacher of math. I know that there's lots of people who are good at math individually, but to say Mr. X is good at math, so let him teach math, when in fact he might not be able to effectively communicate it and break it down for others. That's a skill, that's an art form. Okay. And not everybody can do it. And I think that there's a need to ensure that math teachers are given the all math teachers are exposed to support because it's such an important skill, it's such an important subject that to make sure that they're effectively doing it. I mean, I've had situations where I've heard that maybe a particular teacher might have a very thick accent and maybe the children may not understand what he or she is saying, or he or she can get up there but they're confusing things because they don't know how to break down. So talk to us about how do we ensure that we get stronger pedagogy within mathematics?
Well, there are a few things we could do. One thing that I say that is probably going to be very controversial is I believe that elementary level teachers should take higher level math. I think elementary level teachers should study at least up to calculus one and have an understanding of calculus one. And that's probably controversial because a lot of people go into elementary because they want to teach, they want to give back to the community, they like children, but they might have hated math themselves. They might have felt weak at math. So they say, and then they say, well, I'm not teaching, I'm only teaching kids how to count. So why I gotta know calculus? I'm only teaching kids how to add, subtract and multiply 2 digit, 1 digit, maybe 2 digit numbers. I'm teaching kindergarten. I'm teaching first grade. So why I gotta know trigonometry? Why I gotta, know how to draw a sine wave and all this type of stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. Just like a parent. A parent is going to help their infant child, learn how to walk, but with the expectation that they will not be limited at walking, with the expectation that that child will one day be able to run, be able to jump, be able to climb, or may be able to play sports, play, high level sports, right? So, but when we have this mentality where, well, I'm only teaching this, so therefore I only need to know up to this level, we're limiting ourselves and we're limiting our pedagogy and we're limiting our ability to explain things. Like so often when I'm in tutoring sessions or teaching, if it's a concept that is in arithmetic, but if I see a connection to something in calculus, then we're going to have a conversation about that
Mhm.
with the students. And also, if I see a connection to the calculus, that's going to help me understand that arithmetic concept even better. So it's going to help my explanation, right? Because I have a larger depth of understanding, right?
Mhm.
So that's one thing. And I think what it does is it serves to help teachers actually learn math better. There are a lot of math teachers that don't really know math,
Mhm.
right? And I say that, at the beginning of my career, I would classify myself as a person that didn't really know math, right? I was in a process of really learning it, but I didn't really know it back in 2005 when I started teaching, right? And I say that because I see math instruction as two parts. Well, not even math instruction, even as a student, mathematical understanding as twofold. There's a procedural understanding and there's a conceptual understanding. I was always very strong with procedural understanding algorithms, understanding the formulas, understanding the steps and the process to get an answer, right? But if you were to ask me when I was in fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, why does this work, Akil? I don't know. I don't know why it works. I just know it works. I get the right answer,
Mhm.
right? I go to the answer key, I got the right answer, and I go into the next problem.
Mhm.
That becomes an issue when you start dealing with the SAT, other standardized testing becomes an issue because those standardized tests will test your conceptual knowledge and your conceptual understanding. So it's not enough to just know, oh, I know how to do long division. I know I got to divide, then multiply, then subtract, and drop the number down, and do the
Mhm.
pattern all over again. No, I'm going to test you on the test is going to test your ability to explain why that makes sense and
Mhm.
how it works, right?
Mhm.
So having a conceptual understanding it helps you to understand why the math works. And if you have a conceptual understanding, then you can
Mhm.
find your own shortcuts. And
Mhm.
you can also discern when, okay, when should I use this method or when should I
Mhm.
use that method, as opposed to
Exactly.
I'm just locked into this one algorithm and I'm gonna use this one algorithm every time,
Mhm.
no matter what the problem looks like.
Mhm.
And then I may end up using this one algorithm in this situation that I didn't
Mhm.
even need to use because so I
Exactly.
ended up taking 7 minutes to do this problem that I could have did in
Exactly.
30 seconds if I had
Mhm.
understood the concept of what was
Mhm.
happening. So it's a much more efficient way of solving problems. So again, it takes us back to problem solve, right?
Yeah.
So math is teaching us how to problem solve, right? And in life, we have to solve problems and we want to be
Exactly.
efficient when we're solving problems. So we don't always want to take a long time to solve a problem because sometimes if you take too long, now
Yeah.
you end up creating another problem.
Exactly. And you raised some excellent points there. And certainly, I think people, and that's what we want people to really look at getting this book, How to Use All This Math, Volume One. Could you tell us how people can get this book as well as how they can get in touch with you?
Definitely. So the book is currently available on Amazon, and you can anybody can get in touch with me on Facebook at all this math, YouTube at all this math, Instagram, TikTok at all this math. I definitely want people also, in addition to purchasing the book and using the book, don't just purchase it for support because you might think that some of the stuff I said sounds good. I want you to actually use the book when you buy it, right? So make sure I want your pages should be all dog-eared. You should write in the margins. You should be using it on a regular basis with your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, whoever, right? But also go to our YouTube channel. I started the YouTube channel back in 2020 during the pandemic because I was doing a lot of tutoring, a lot of virtual tutoring, and I wanted to tutor more people. But I realized that it was only 24 hours in a day, and I was only one person. Well, me and my son were only two people because he's been tutoring with the company since he was in ninth grade. So it was only two of us, and we couldn't tutor everybody. We couldn't tutor the whole Black community because I have a goal of teaching math to the entire Black community, right? So but we couldn't do it all alone, so I wanted to expand our reach and take advantage of resources that were already available, such as YouTube, and the YouTube platform. So we currently have almost 700 videos, ranging from arithmetic up to calculus 1. So definitely take a look. There are different playlists where um, there are different playlists where the different topics are organized, by playlist. So definitely, take a look at the YouTube channel. Also, the videos are infused with Black history. So you're gonna get a
Mhm.
little in most of the videos, you get a little Black history lesson.
Mhm.
Because we don't want to limit our Black history to February, right? We
Mhm.
you want to we're Black, 12 months out of the year. So we
Mhm.
should we should embrace our history, 12 months out of the year. So that's something else you're gonna get,
Yeah.
a very culturally relevant experience with being exposed to mathematics on the All This Math YouTube channel.
Well, I just say on that note, we want to sincerely thank you, Brother Keel, for your dedication, your consciousness, and your really sustained dedication to the education of our children, our community, mathematically. And certainly wish you much success in the work that you're doing and look forward to having you back again. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.